On the road to Macstock with Brian Flanagan-Arthurs. This is MacVoices. MacVoices is supported by MacVoices Magazine, our free magazine on Flipboard and on the web. Want to cut through all the noise and find out what you can do with your Apple gear? MacVoices Magazine focuses on just that, aggregating the best how-to articles and information. Get it by searching for MacVoices in the Flipboard app or visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is another entry on the road to Macstock. We're heading for Crystal Lake, Illinois in July for Macstock Conference and Expo. We're talking to as many of the speakers as we can wrangle before then, so you know who they are. You kind of know what to expect when you sit down in their sessions, and hopefully everybody gets to know each other just a little bit better, even if it's virtually. This time around, we have Mr. Brian Flanagan-Arthurs, a returning speaker to Macstock. Brian, it's great to see you.
Thank you so much. So great to see you, and so excited to be returning to Macstock.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it already. I'm doing laundry in preparation for it, just to make sure I have clean socks, which will be a relief to everyone. Brian, last year you were a first-time speaker last year, and you wowed everybody with your presentation. So I think a lot of folks are going to be having high expectations of you this year. What are you going to be talking about?
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a blast last year, and I'm definitely excited to present once again this year. This year, I'm pivoting a little bit. Last year, I presented on basically some great options for cord cutters for watching sports programming. And this year, I've pivoted to a different topic called Automate, but Don't Take Shortcuts.
Okay. Very punny.
And it all connects, of course, with our Apple audience.
Yeah. Of course. Okay. So that's, we try not to ask you to do the presentation here. We sort of try to talk around it. So is it fair for me to assume that you will not be focusing on using shortcuts as we know them in the OSs, but more maybe other things?
Actually, a little bit of both. I think with regards to the aspects of automation, I will be showing some aspects related to the Shortcuts app, as well as things related to the focus mode on your phone, different things related to smart automations. The big idea is to really focus and consider that we only have a limited amount of time in our weeks, in our days, and with that limited amount of time, and it seems like just a growing list of tasks that need to be completed, how can we best utilize our time so that we can get the most out of ourselves and also get the most out of our productivity and how we want to learn? The second half of my presentation that focuses on the aspect of not taking shortcuts focuses on the areas of what's important to know and to learn because we are saving some time. What are some aspects that we can do to grow what we know and to be our best selves and to prepare for maybe some pivots in the workplace as it relates to things like AI?
Okay, so that's a good one. I'm anxious to hear that part of it. Brian, it seems like every time the word automation comes up, people sort of freeze. I can't quite decide why they're afraid of automation, and I'm thinking about relatively simple automation kinds of tasks. I personally understand the idea that I'm not sure I'm anxious to build a 30-step automation and then have a system software update or a software conflict break it, and I've got to start over or troubleshoot it. But those, between 1 and 10-step automations save so much time, and yet people are afraid to try them or implement them.
Yeah, and for my presentation, I'm not necessarily focused on building out real complicated automations or shortcuts as they would, but rather just thinking about what are some things that we can just do automatically in our lives where we can set it almost like a set it and forget it type mentality. So something is set where we don't have to really focus and concentrate on it. And yet the data that comes back to us is so rich and can make us make informed decisions on making pivots, whether it be related to our health or finances or looking at maybe how much electricity we might be spending in our households based on data that if we can do a little bit of the legwork up front, what are some of the great benefits we can get back that if we didn't have that automation or that automatic aspect to it, could end up taking a very long time if we manually had to do it every single time.
Yeah, and it's amazing if you just take that 10 minutes of automation work to set it up, and it
Right.
saves you 30 seconds. Okay, do the math and figure out how many times does that automation have to happen before it starts paying you benefits. And in spite of what I said before, if you build the automations correctly and don't get too crazy or too aggressive, they don't break that often.
No, and I think if you really take the time too to consider what you're doing as far as making that particular automation or that shortcut, it helps with even if it does break, you might understand why it broke and what part of it might need to be changed out or deleted or that type of thing too. So I think that kind of going into the second half of the presentation, having that deep learning about understanding the why we do a thing the way we do it or how we do it, and kind of digging into its core or its roots. I think that could help because at the end of the day, if we focus on the things that we control instead of the things we can't control, I think we get a lot more bang for our buck.
You said a mouthful there. If we could all just learn to do that. Unfortunately, a lot of us don't.
And it's a
The
it's a muscle. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's not going to
Well,
be overnight. Yeah.
yeah, and if you build those things, inevitably, if you build simple ones, then you're going to want to stretch yourself, maybe with the next one or the next two, and then the next five. And so again, the 30-step automations. Okay, hey, if you're into it, go for it. But I think trying to get people to take that first step is one of the biggest challenges, and hopefully you can provide them with some easy steps where they can take that first step and go.
Definitely. Yeah. This presentation is purposely being created with the Apple user in mind, and not just that, but really focusing on what already comes out of the box with our computers, with our cell phones, with our watches. There's amazing software that can do what I'm going to demonstrate and even more. But I just want to make it extremely friendly to everybody, where it's something that what you purchase right away at the store, no extra packages, you can do these things yourself. And I think that helps a little bit, um, kind of putting everybody at ease a little bit. That no matter where you're at in the process, we can all utilize these particular steps and actions.
So, from your description, unless I missed something, which is possible, but from your description, it sounds like it's going to be a little more information based. Do you intend to include home automation as part of this package at all?
Yeah, I've got some very, very basic home automation aspects that'll be discussed with regards to the automation part of it. And I think when I don't want to give too much away, but at the same time, being able to um, use some of the most basic smart devices that you can pick up at really, you could just pick up anywhere, not just through your Amazons and so forth, but even places like Target or Home Depot or Lowe's. A lot of them can have smart switches and plugs and things of that nature nowadays too.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And it's funny where I said before that I think automation scares people. For some reason, the automation of home devices seems to be sexy enough that people then want to try that. So it really is all in the perception of how you think about automation.
And I would think too, one thing is to consider, are you trying to solve a problem that already exists, or are you creating almost like a solution to a problem that doesn't exist yet? And I think if you go with the former instead of the latter, where you're trying to solve a problem, then I think you get that satisfaction from it, and then you're probably more willing to maybe even learn more about it and to dive deeper because it's providing you a solution to something that you were curious about, or something that you would like to, maybe it's to save energy or to save money, those types of things, to make it meaningful to the individual.
I'm curious to see if you've had this experience. I've done some automation here, especially around the house. And then I go and do some traveling. And I walk in the room and I tell one of the smart assistants to turn this on, turn that off, whatever. And of course, it doesn't because they aren't there. And I suddenly realize how much I have integrated even simple automations into my life and how much I miss them when they're not there. And look, it's not, oh my God, I don't want you to think I'm so lazy that I can't go and turn on a switch. But at the same time, it's just really convenient and fun at times to do that.
Well, and you bring up a great point. I think the human brain and the human condition, it loves routine. It loves being able to be sure of something. When you take a particular action, you're expecting a reaction. And so if you've set up your house with particular lights that turn on at certain times of the evening and turn off at certain times of the day, um, those types of things, if they're not present in your life, maybe you're on travel and you're staying at a hotel. um, I've sometimes got, woken up in the middle of the night and asked for the A lady to turn on particular lamps. I'm like, oh, no, it's not going to turn on. There's no way. I'm not at home. Those types of things. So, and I think that's part of it. We get used to things, and we do things on purpose. We set them up in such a way so that they're useful to us. And when they're not there, whether it's by a fault, maybe electricity went out and something gets shorted or something of that nature. Those things can definitely cause a disruption in our routines.
I mean, who would buy a TV set right now without a remote control? Nobody. And yet we have the option to include, we call it automation, but a version of a remote control into so many different things. Sometimes they're even smarter than just on off. And yet people are afraid of it. And I'm anxious to see what you're going to focus on and what you'll come up with, because that's what has happened to me. That now, I mean, if I'm going to go anywhere for any length of time, I'm going to try to figure out some way to take at least part of my automations with me. Might not be something not going to be a lamp, but it might be a smart plug or something like that I can, as you say, tuck into a travel bag and plug a lamp into, and therefore I've got my control back.
Right. And I think if we expand the definition of our automations and thinking about our routines, thinking about the reminders app and different things that it tells me on a daily basis, to whether it's to check various news sources or to check in to see if a particular utility bill was paid. It's those types of things too, where I don't have to take my mental energy and run through the list every day. Did I pay this particular bill? Or did I was checking for this particular news source? Those types of things. We can definitely, in a very easy way, take that with us as long as we have our phone, our computers. We don't necessarily have to be at home for those types of things either.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, the phone. I mean, the phone has added such a dimension to things that now, yeah, you can take at least some of the things that you're going to show us easily with you. In fact, you're taking them with you whether you want to or not, because they're always on your phone.
Yeah. Well, and then even or around our wrists. If you think about the automated aspect to like connected with our health, where you might get an anomaly of your heart rate, maybe that um, if you weren't, if it wasn't an automatic thing popping up as a notification for you, you may not take the time to stop what you're doing, check your heart rate, and then have it report back. But if it's something that automatically comes up on your watch, that's great. And that data is captured, and you can look at it, depending on the situation, share with your doctor, that type of thing too, to see looking for patterns.
That's such a great example because I don't even think of that as an automation, but it is. It's an automation that's running constantly on my wrist and just waiting for something to happen. Well, let's hope nothing happens, but the idea that it's constantly running that automation, and if the right thing triggers it, I don't think it's obvious, but I don't think I ever thought about the Apple Watch and some of the health monitoring things as an automation.
Yeah, it's almost like re-looking at the definition of a smart assistant, whereas opposed to the smart assistant that you're invoking to have it answer questions for you, it's the smart assistant that's just laying in the background, just constantly taking in all that data and information and ready to share with you when it sees something out of the ordinary, or maybe on a regular basis. I'm thinking of the sleep aspect to the watch, and where for me at least, it's set up where every morning I get up, it tells me how I slept the night before, and then whether or not that was an increase or decrease relative to last week. So in that aspect of being an automated data collection, that's with companies like Apple, that's kept private and in between you and your devices and nobody else, you have that choice then to share it in a bigger way, with others.
So I'm coming away from this conversation feeling like I know a little bit about what to expect, but I also feel like you may force me to think about automations in a little bit different way, like you already have here. And I love that because I think that other people will look at things like that and say, gee, I'm already using automations. I just didn't think of them as automations.
Yeah, I think, if we expand kind of like our definition of it, I think you can really think about what is its core, what is it at its core, what an automation does. It's automating things in our lives that can give us back that time, that energy, and at the same time provide me with a lot more data than I could even. Obviously, I'm sleeping. I can't measure my own sleep. I need that external device. So and then the other half is, okay, so now that you have that information at hand, or you have that time now that's been given back to you, what can you do next? What are some of the possibilities that you can then take to expand and to better ourselves, to better ourselves with our families and in our workplaces, and considering the future too. How does the workplace environment change because of things like artificial intelligence, machine learning? How do those aspects play a part as well?
And that's no small thing either, because not only is it happening already, but there's so many questions and debates around it that I feel like you really should be involved in some of it. I mean, even look, and I'm not trying to talk you into or out of anything, but if you are at least familiar with it, you can evaluate intelligently the benefits versus the drawbacks without just waiting for somebody else to tell you what they are in relation to what you do or what you want to do.
Right. And I think using that keyword evaluate is huge, because part of, I think, this next age of learning and I'm an educator, so sometimes it's, I'm learning every day, but I'm helping to educate youth as well. So at the same time, how do we best prepare our students for the future? How do we prepare ourselves for the future? That keyword evaluate, when you're putting in that data, as maybe a prompt, and it's coming back at you with information, how can you evaluate it? Does that seem right? How, is there any particular bias perhaps? Is there a way that the GPT didn't understand what it is you were trying to ask it? Did it interpret it in a different way? Those are some of the questions and the thought processes that I think we should really focus and consider on as well when it comes to learning. And I kind of use the analogy of just the steps of, years ago, in your math class, you might have been told you better learn how to do this because who knows, you're never going to have a calculator at your, at your disposal 24/7, so you better learn how to add, subtract, multiply, divide all these numbers together by hand. And we think about that, okay, well, no, the calculator is pretty handy and it's pretty much everywhere. And then you move up to the next level of considering, okay, well, what about you can look it up on the internet. You can go to a desktop computer and, plug in your question in Google or Bing or whatnot, and you could try to find out what the answer is. Okay, but what if you're not going to be near your computer? And that was a very valid concern for a while until now it's at the palm of your hand. And then what? And it's so you can see whether it's the smartest, just ask it, what's the score, of the latest basketball game you were wanting to watch, to get that quick information. It really caused me as an educator to really consider, what am I asking my students? What do I want them to know and be able to do? And when I first got into education, there was a lot more as a history teacher of names, dates, people, events, those types of recall information that was a lot more popular. But as the smart assistants started popping up, and as people were able to just have the internet, at their disposal in their hand, it's like, why are you asking somebody that? It's good to know to an extent, but it's more important to know how to retrieve that information in a factual way. But what else can you learn? The whys. Why are they? Why did this particular group of people react in this particular way, given this stimulus? In a particular war or maybe a time of peace. Like, what motivates human beings, for example. And so the different thought processes and what we want students to know and be able to do, it changes with that technology as well.
Brian, I don't want to take us down this direction too far, but as an educator, you have a very different view of some of these things, because you're not looking at it just now. You're not even looking at it just for the future. You're looking at it as to what you're teaching the kids about their future and what their needs are going to be. And that to me is really exciting. It's going to give you a completely different take on automation and why people need to pay attention to it. And I feel like you, just based on this conversation, you will be bringing that to this session.
Thank you. And even kicking it back to the technology in our hands, think about all the jobs that didn't even exist as it relates to having a smartphone with a GPS in it. I'm thinking of the ride sharing services, for example, or being able to order DoorDash and those types of things. All different things that you think of, just the industries that exploded as a result of technology. And so when you go back and you ask somebody, it might be one thing to ask students who are approaching their next couple of years of finishing high school and into college or the workplace or vocational school, what is it you want to do right after? And it's pretty reasonable, I think, to assume some of the jobs, and the vast majority of the jobs that are around today will be around in 3 to 5 years. It's very, very possible. But when you're asking somebody to invest their time and energy to earn a degree, to focus on something in the next 10 to 15 years, what is it that what skill set should they be able to have, to be able to be successful, and however they define success is a very interesting question as it relates to technology.
Yeah. And to bring this full circle back to where we started and why people need to pay attention to this session, the first time you ordered an Uber, the first time you ordered something through DoorDash, you were just, I'm not so sure about this. Okay, well, maybe I'll give it a try. And, you stumbled through it. Maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you didn't. But you got over that first hurdle. You learned. And now, for me, I don't even think about ordering a Lyft, a Lyft or an Uber anymore. Sure. I just do it. It's this, and same thing with DoorDash, because now it's part of my life. It's part of my tool set. And come and listen to Brian's session, folks, and make it part of your tool set too, because he already has me thinking about a few different things that I hadn't thought of as automations, and now I got to go and maybe try to expand on them. Brian, I didn't expect to get homework.
Well, as an educator, I guess it comes with part of the delivery.
Okay, I'm noting that for future interviews. So Mike Potters has been very kind to give us discount codes where you can save $50 off of attending Macstock. Brian, what is your code?
Yeah, my code is Brian8944. So that's BRIAN 8944.
Which, if I remember correctly, also just happens to be your social media handle.
It is, and where I direct people for my website as well, brian8944.com.
Perfect. So, folks, there's $50. Brian just gave you $50 to attend Macstock Conference and Expo coming up in July in Crystal Lake, Illinois. We'll have links in the show notes, of course, where you can go to register, get the hotel information, see who all the other speakers are, and who you'll be hearing about more on the road to Macstock. But we're going to be there, and we are going to have a great time from the first thing in the morning to the last thing at night, which sometimes turns into the last thing the next morning. But I try to avoid that, but somehow I always get drug in. Brian, I'm looking forward to seeing you there. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone, and I hope that we will get to all meet some new friends as well as see some old ones.
Likewise, and thank you again so much for allowing me to share. I can't wait.
It's always a pleasure. I'm anxious to see what you've come up with. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is The Road to Macstock on MacVoices. We will be back with more soon. But until then, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.